Now, Carol, did you know your son had autism when he was 6 months old?
No, I didn't. He was, when we first met him at the orphanage, he was a super happy little guy, had sort of the biggest smile of all the kids, and no, we had no idea.
Wow. So how did you find out?
When he was around 2.5, I guess, we started noticing differences. Interestingly, he was actually at a childcare provider at that time who also had a son with autism. And so she had mentioned to me that she was sort of seeing some flags. And of course, I didn't want to hear that. So kind of pushed that away for a little while longer. But it just kept coming up. Eventually, we were seeing a speech therapist, and she suggested that she was seeing signs also that we may need to look into it. And eventually, we sought out a psychologist who was able to give us a diagnosis at 3.5.
So tell me a little bit about your reaction. You mentioned this time of denial. What was that like? Because I imagine some listeners might be able to identify with that. For all sorts of reasons, we deny, reality. We don't want to hear it, right?
Mm-hmm. For me, the denial was largely about his social nature. He's an incredibly social little guy, and obviously the love of our life. And there was something about that label that was just so incredibly stigmatized for me, which I guess has really become part of my story, is wanting to share with people my story in an effort to help reduce that stigma and see that it's not necessarily what many of us think it is, if that makes sense.
What were some of the signs you were seeing? And maybe let's do a bit of myth busting here.
Sure. He was not responding to questions, so that was one of the things the childcare provider mentioned, and so that is a major red flag. But at home, he was. So that was sort of part of why it was difficult for me to trust in this woman's assessment. Some of the other things were just as he got older, his peer relationships started to fall apart. So whereas when he was younger, he sort of fit in and looked very similar to his peers, as they approached around 3 years of age, he couldn't seem to follow along. They were having many conversations and that sort of thing, and he wasn't able to follow along. So those are not myths. Those are true signs that I was not really in tune with initially. And in terms of the myth, I guess it's more around what life with autism looks like. And I think part of my denial was related to this belief that it was sort of all doom and gloom. Like once they receive a diagnosis, it's the end.
A life sentence.
Yes, that's a term many people use.
Right.
And with respect to denial, I think it can be healthy in a sense that it can help initially families come to terms with it, because if they accept it right away, sometimes it's too much. So they start to recognize that there's these symptoms, and they kind of, it kind of settles in, but they don't necessarily seize it and deal with it, before they can and before they're capable of doing so.
That's a really good perspective. We need some time to assimilate this new information and to integrate it into our new understanding.
So I think that my personal experience is that almost every single parent kind of has that phase of denial, and rather than beating themselves up over it, know that it's just a healthy phase that they go through that allows them to be more accepting of it.